Coming to you from the studios of WTAP Plus, it's Mental Health Mondays with Andrew Noll.
Good afternoon, Mid-Ohio Valley, and welcome in to another episode of Mental Health Mondays. I'm your host, Andrew Noll. For this week's episode, we're going to be talking about Alcohol Awareness Month. Joining me in studio today, as always, is our friend Rachael Scheiding with Westbrook Health Services. Rachel, thanks so much for joining us again this week.
Hi, Andrew. Thanks for having me.
Of course, it's a pleasure to have you as always, but let's get right into it. It's the month of April, and Alcohol Awareness Month always happens during this time to raise awareness for alcohol, obviously a thing that can become very addictive for some people and obviously very consuming. So first thing that I'd like to ask you is, can you tell us a little bit more about what Alcohol Awareness Month is and why it exists?
Sure. So Alcohol Awareness Month is meant to make people kind of take a look at their drinking habits, and become aware of resources if they need resources to stop drinking or reduce drinking, to start conversations between people that maybe need to talk about their alcohol use or a loved one's alcohol use but don't know how to start. And so all of those things we kind of try to do during Alcohol Awareness Month.
Okay, and so when you hear alcohol problem, what do you want people to understand that they often get wrong?
That an alcohol problem might look like somebody drinking to intoxication every day, but it also might look like somebody binge drinking or partying hard on the weekends and not drinking during the week or something like that. That it might look like kids in college drinking too heavily, that it can be absolutely devastating to families and to people who are engaging in drinking behavior.
Okay, and so how would you define moderate, heavy, and binge drinking?
So moderate drinking would be defined by having maybe 3 to 5 drinks, maybe 3 to 5 days a week, possibly. Something that is typically not daily, or if it is daily, then it's typically not drinking to blackout or severe intoxication. Whereas severe drinking behavior would be that drinking to intoxication or to blackout almost every day, versus binge drinking, which is like isolated incidents of drinking to intoxication or blackout. So that would be the folks that are drinking heavily on maybe Friday and Saturday nights and then kind of sober themselves up so they can work Monday through Friday kinds of things.
All right, that makes sense. And so is there really such a thing as safe drinking, or is that kind of a misleading idea?
So there are ways to drink that are considered safer. I'm not sure I would say it's ever 100% safe necessarily. But there are drinking habits that are more kind of social, or are more controlled, I guess. And that's sort of how we determine whether drinking is a diagnosed problem or not, is a lot of times in how much control the person has over it. So if you, let's say, have a couple of drinks every year on your birthday and major holidays, but other than that you don't drink, we would say that that's probably a safer way of drinking. Or if you're somebody who has, a couple of drinks like once a week, we would say that's maybe safer drinking pattern.
Okay, that definitely makes sense. And so what are some of the early warning signs that someone's drinking is becoming risky before it looks like addiction?
Before addiction, you'll see things starting to slip out of the person's control. So maybe they intend to drink, but every time they go out drinking, they say, I'm only going to have 2 or 3, and they end up having 4 or 5. You might see some consequences that the person doesn't intend. So they'll start to say, oh God, I was so drunk that I don't even know what I did yesterday, or I was so drunk that I drove home and I would never do that. I don't believe in driving under the influence, but I did, and I can't believe I did that. Or, I woke up somewhere and I don't know how I got there, and with a person that I didn't know, those kinds of things. You start to see a little bit of slip in that control, and the person starting to have a little bit of like regret or confusion about what they did.
Okay, and so how do you explain the difference between alcohol use, alcohol misuse, and alcohol use disorder?
So alcohol use is any use of alcohol. If you have one drink, you're using alcohol.
That seems pretty simple.
Yeah. Alcohol misuse is any use of alcohol that is, I guess, more than what we would call social or functional drinking. So again, having that 3 or 4 instead of 2 or 3. Or drinking in times when it wouldn't be appropriate, like somebody who's drinking while they're on the clock at work. That would be alcohol misuse. Or someone who's drinking while they're driving, or drinking while they're, babysitting and expected to be sober, those kinds of things. And then an alcohol use disorder is a clinical diagnosis. So when you have those criteria met of not being able to control the drinking behavior, having those unintended negative consequences, starting to find that your tolerance is getting really high, where maybe 2 or 3 drinks made you feel pretty tipsy and good, but now it takes 5 or 6 to feel that way, and continued use despite those negative consequences. So, if you end up having a DUI, a lot of people would say, I had a DUI and that was my wake-up call to stop drinking. But other people, they get a DUI and they continue to drink. That would be a sign of a possible disorder.
Okay. And so what are some of the short-term and long-term health effects of alcohol that people don't usually maybe hear about?
Yeah, so short term, while you're drinking, health effects are happening. So alcohol, of course, makes your blood a little bit thinner, makes your stomach acid produce at a higher rate. It's going to change some of your brain function and make you less inhibited, a little bit more emotional in a lot of instances. Judgment is going to be maybe not quite as good as it normally would be. Less fear of consequences, those kinds of things. And then short term, after getting intoxicated, most people know what a hangover feels like. That's a physical health issue. So feeling dehydrated, nauseous, headaches, body aches, tired, irritable, those kinds of things that we have during a hangover would be sort of short-term effects of alcohol use. And then long-term, for people who drink regularly or heavily for a long period of time, may start to notice cardiac issues, liver and kidney issues, and difficulty with thinking, memory, judgment, decision-making, those kinds of things. And then in extreme cases can lead to alcohol-induced dementia.
Okay. And so how does alcohol misuse show up inside families? What might kids notice even if adults think they're hiding it?
Kids a lot of times can tell when somebody is drinking because they see the changes in behavior. So some kids will notice that their parents get meaner when they're drinking. Some kids will notice that their parents get nicer when they're drinking. Some kids might notice that mom always has to have wine in the evenings, or dad always has to have a few beers before bed, and that's just kind of the norm in their house. I remember when I was 5 or 6, my dad was having a beer, and I asked to try it, and he let me try a sip, and I was like, that is horrible. Why would you do that? So kids definitely pick up on those things, whether you think you're hiding it or not. A lot of times they can sense the changes in behavior, and they'll start to put 2 and 2 together, like, oh, mom drinks a couple glasses of wine and then her behavior changes in this way. The wine and the behavior change go together. Kids are pretty smart about connecting things like that.
Right, and it's funny you mentioned your dad, because I have a similar story to that too. I might have not been 5, a couple years older, but my dad was the type, went to work at like 6 a.m., came back around 6 p.m., 7 p.m. at night. Then he called it the man cave, hung out downstairs in the basement and watched a lot of sports at night before he went to bed. Usually had a beer or two, but I remember two specifically. I believe it was a Budweiser. I asked him if I could have a sip because I'd always seen him, having one, like you mentioned, having a couple at night, and tried it and was like, bleh. I was like, what is this thing? Now I really like beer. I'm a Michelob Ultra, Bud Light, Budweiser's not bad too, I wouldn't say, but just funny that you have a similar story. Now, I want to talk about moms because you brought up that glass of wine as well. Mom wine culture and rosé all day are everywhere. What impact does that have on how women see their own drinking?
Yeah, I think mom wine culture has become a bigger thing lately. And talk about it's wine o'clock and those kinds of things.
It's wine o'clock somewhere.
Right. And it's sort of almost acknowledging the stress of being a mother, which is a good thing. But then giving permission to deal with that stress with alcohol and saying that's just that can be a real normal mom thing, to just kind of drink wine to cope with the stress of being a mom and a wife and all the duties that comes with. So that can make it harder for women to recognize if they're having a problem with alcohol because it's kind of so accepted. It's something that maybe their other mom friends are doing or don't feel like is an issue, and culturally it's become more permissible and accepted. And so it makes it tougher to then say, I might have a problem with my rosé all day. That might actually be an issue for me and like a serious issue because it's treated so much as kind of a joke or a normal thing.
Okay. And so for parents who drink, what are some healthy ways to model alcohol use or to explain why they don't drink to their children?
So for parents who drink, I think making it clear to kids that it's something that grown-ups are allowed to do. And that's because alcohol can affect your brain, and grown-up brains are done developing more so than kid brains. That's how I explain it to mine.
Right.
The same way that, there's different rules for grown-ups for a lot of things, right? So it's okay to say grown-ups can have this and kids can't, and this is why. I think explaining that is important. It's also important to talk to kids about the positives and the risks of drinking, and that they will probably one day be offered alcohol and they might want to try it, and that's a pretty typical thing that kids experience, and that you hope they'll talk to you when that happens, whether they try it or not. Just so you can be in the know and kind of coach them through those things. I think that is really important conversations to have. If you're a parent who doesn't drink, maybe you're in recovery, or maybe you just don't like the taste of it and you just don't do it, then explaining to kids why other people drink and that it's not an evil thing, it's not a demon thing, right? Just because you are in recovery and can't drink doesn't mean everybody shouldn't, right? Or everybody can't. But explaining why you don't, because I tried to drink and it became a problem for me, and this is the problems it caused, and this is why I decided to stop, and how my life is better without it, and, those kinds of things. A lot of people who are involved in 12-step meetings will take their kids, and I think that's great for their kids to get to hear recovery stories and meet with people in recovery and kind of see that side of things if their parents are in that community.
Definitely. And so I want to shift the conversation. You have already a little bit. We've talking about younger kids now, and it was something that you said too, being pressured or offered to. That's kind of the key word here for me. How has social media and party content changed the pressure young people feel the need to drink? Yeah,
I think kids are so exposed to everything now, right? Because of social media and internet accessibility and all of that. So they're going to see young adults drinking and having a great time and think, I want to have that great time, and if alcohol helps with that, then why wouldn't I drink? So it puts that idea maybe earlier than we used to get it.
Yeah,
when I was a kid, especially before there was social media. So that is a big piece, is just the exposure of seeing it so much. And then when kids are in high school and they start to get offered alcohol, or they're sneaking it out of their parents' fridge, right? Or they're going to parties in someone's garage or someone's basement and there's alcohol there.
Yep.
All their friends might be doing it, so they want to do it too. They don't want to feel weird or get made fun of,
right,
or draw attention to themselves in that way. And so it's important as a parent to talk to your kids about, you can say no, and here's ways to do that won't draw as much attention to yourself. And if you're in a situation where you feel uncomfortable, you can call me. Coming up with a code word is really great for parents and kids. So, if you're in a situation where you don't want to be, but you don't want to be the uncool kid that's like, I don't want to be around alcohol, my mom's going to come get me. You can text the code word and your mom will call and say, you didn't do your chores, you need to come home right now, and they're going to come and get you. And that way you can say, yeah, my mom's such a buzzkill, instead of being the kid that says, I'm not going to drink.
Hey, it's always easy to blame the parent then, if they do something like that. I really like that idea of the code word and being able to, mom or dad, whoever it may be, is on your side then, getting you out of that bad situation.
Yeah. And then letting your kids know, like, if they get into a situation where they do drink and they don't know what to do, that they can call, and you're not going to yell at them and scream at them and scold them. And, we're probably going to have a talk the next day about what happened and why that happened and stuff. But if you're in a situation and you don't know how to get out of it, call mom or call dad and they will come and get you, no question. I think that's an important thing to have set up.
Definitely. I think that is some great advice, Rachel. Now, we're going to quickly take a break here, and then when we come back, we're going to continue our conversation about Alcohol Awareness Month, so don't go anywhere, Mid-Ohio Valley. Welcome back, Mid-Ohio Valley, to Mental Health Monday. I'm your host, Andrew Noll, joined alongside our good friend, Rachael Scheiding with Westbrook Health Services. We're talking about Alcohol Awareness Month, since that happens during the month of April, and that's the month we're in right now, so we figured this would be a good conversation to raise a little bit of awareness about it and, let people know what it truly is about and the different things about alcohol that people should know. So, Rachel, we've talked about kind of some of the simpler things involved, I feel like, with Alcohol Awareness Month, things that people probably may know or have heard about, but let's kind of, dive a little bit deeper into this. So first thing I want to ask you is, what are some red flag behaviors that suggest drinking has moved from not just a habit, but to a problem?
So one red flag behavior is if you find that you are minimizing your drinking, either to yourself or to other people. So when somebody asks how much you've had to drink, you say less than what it actually was. Or if somebody asks how often you're drinking, you're saying less often than what it actually is. If you find that you're hiding alcohol from people in your home so that they won't find it, or that people in your home are starting to show disappointment or concern in your drinking, that can be a red flag. If you find that you're drinking at times when you normally wouldn't, like let's say you always had a few drinks after work, but now you find that you're having a beer when you wake up also.
Right.
Those kinds of things. You start to notice that you're starting to slide towards drinking more often and hiding it a little bit more from other people.
Okay. And so how can someone do an honest self-check on their drinking without, getting defensive or shameful?
Yeah, I think education is a big help in removing shame. So starting to look at, what is typical drinking behavior and what is the criteria for when it's a problem. There are self-screeners online that you can take. If you just Google, alcohol use screen, there's, a few simple questions, and then the screener can pop up an answer of like, you are at risk for having a problem, or you're at low risk for having a problem, those kinds of things. So I think just getting educated on what an alcohol problem looks like and kind of taking the morality out of it. It doesn't mean you're a bad person if you have an alcohol problem. It doesn't mean that you're doing something wrong, morally wrong. It just means that there's something happening that maybe needs some attention.
Okay. And so if you're worried about someone's drinking, maybe it's a loved one, maybe it's a friend, what's the best way to bring it up to them without pushing them away?
So the best way is to come from a place of concern and caring versus a place of judgment. We never want to make those you statements of you're doing this, you're drinking too much, you're out all night at the bar, those kinds of things are going to put people on the defense right away. But if you say, I feel like we've not been as connected as we used to be, and I wonder if the alcohol is playing a part in that, or I've really missed spending time with you. It seems like there's a lot of times when we used to hang out, but now you're passed out because you drank or something like that. Coming from that position of, how I care about you, not you're doing something bad.
Okay. I think that's very smart because, like you said, a lot of people do get defensive when it's the you did this or you're doing that kind of statements, and where, you're telling them how it's affecting you, maybe rather than how it could be affecting them immediately. Right. I think is definitely a great little tidbit there to try to, approach it softly to people and hopefully get them on the same page with you where they're willing to listen, rather than, it becomes an argument and it becomes maybe even a fight for some people, and it gets, scary in that situation, because obviously you don't want to lose someone that you think you're trying to help them and they think you're trying to push them away or tell them they're doing something wrong. Because a lot of people out there in the world, me myself included, have the issue of feel like they're being attacked sometimes when things are being said, and maybe we are sometimes, and I personally think sometimes I could be, but I also think sometimes too I'm very bad at reading those kinds of things if people try to bring up not necessarily alcohol, but in other situations where, they try to tell you you're doing this, you're doing that, rather than like, this is happening, it's making me feel this way, and I'm wondering if it's because something else is happening,
right.
XYZ, as you said. So I like that advice that you gave. So what kinds of treatment and support exist today beyond the traditional 12-step model? I know you talked about the model briefly earlier, but you can also mention that as well for maybe people that don't know.
Yeah, so we've got multiple levels of treatment and support for alcohol use issues or problems. Kind of the lowest level is community supports and peer supports. So like those 12-step meetings, Narcotics Anonymous, Alcoholics Anonymous are the main ones. And but there's also a program called Smart Recovery, which is also a peer support group. There's Celebrate Recovery, which is a faith-based peer support group. So that's kind of the lowest level. It's not treatment. And then we would go up to outpatient treatment, which would be therapy and medication services, coming to appointments, that kind of thing. Next up from that would be detox, which typically is done in a facility, especially with alcohol, because alcohol detox can be risky in terms of having seizures and those kinds of things that can lead to, serious health problems. And then up from detox is rehab, which is typically a 28 to 35-day stay in a facility. And then from rehab is like residential treatment, which can be 3 months to 2 years in some cases.
Okay, and so you mentioned all the things that I was going to ask in my next question, at least partially, but how do you help people choose between rehab, outpatient counseling, or support group?
So the biggest question that I always have for people is, what are you willing to do? Because I might think this person should go to detox, rehab, and residential treatment. They might not be willing to do that, and so that's not a good path.
Yes.
What I'm going to start with is educating about the options. Just like I just said, these are the options. This is what they entail. If you decide to do these options, this is what would be expected of you. Which of those sounds like a good fit? And I'm going to let the person choose. Whatever they choose is what we're going to go with. If I think that they need to go to detox and they want to start with outpatient, we're going to start with outpatient. And that may work out. But if it doesn't, then I'm going to revisit that conversation and say, we've been doing outpatient for a few months and it doesn't seem like your drinking has changed. Maybe we need to think about detox. Are you willing to look at that with me now that we've tried outpatient and it doesn't seem like that's helping? So it can be an ongoing conversation, but the biggest question is, what is the person willing to do? Whatever foot in the door we can get, that's where we're going to start.
Definitely. And a follow-up question to that is, do you ever kind of see, I don't know how many situations you've dealt with, people either needing to go to rehab or, but is there one that when you let people choose that maybe they kind of lean towards first, or that seems to be the most frequent option that people choose?
I would say most people, by the time they get to asking for treatment, are in a place where they recognize that they need to go to detox.
Okay.
That their body is physically dependent. They've tried to quit on their own and been unable to do it. The symptoms of withdrawal are too difficult to do on their own, and so they're ready to go to detox. So that's normally where people start that I've worked with. But if hopefully people start to come in sooner than that point, which is what I would like to see happen, we definitely can start with outpatient, and that can be successful for folks.
Okay, great. And so how does recovery look like in real life? Not just the before and after pictures that you see a lot of people post on social media, if they do that then.
Yeah, being in recovery with alcohol is super challenging because alcohol is legal. It's at a lot of functions. It's in restaurants. It's on TV, right? It's in the gas station coolers. So it's very challenging with alcohol, especially because it's so socially accepted and legal. So what it looks like is a lot of support, a lot of preparation for those situations where you might have to be around alcohol or people who are drinking. A lot of who am I going to call when I'm triggered by the beer commercials on the Super Bowl, you know, and those kinds of things. Some
pretty good commercials, though. I enjoy them.
Oh, yeah, they're very effective. So, yeah, it looks like building a support system and using it and doing a lot of prep work for those times when you have to be around or encounter alcohol use.
Okay. And so how can family and friends be supportive without enabling?
So if you're trying to support someone who's in recovery, one of the best things you can do is to not drink around them and to make sure that you're not under the influence around them. If somebody lives with you who's in recovery, don't keep alcohol in your house, just out of respect for them and what they're doing. It doesn't mean you can't ever drink, but it just means, that you're going to try to not trigger them because you care about them and you don't want to make their recovery harder. If you're trying to support someone who maybe is drinking problematically and they're not ready to admit that or ready to seek treatment, then it looks like setting really strong, clear boundaries of when and how you'll spend time with them. So you might say, I love you and I want you to come to family gatherings, but if you show up drunk, I'm going to tell you to leave. I want you in my life when you're sober, and I will do everything I can to help you get sober, but I won't do anything to help you keep drinking. So if you ask me for money, I'm going to say no. If you want me to bail you out of jail because you got arrested for public intox or something like that, I'm going to say no. But if you ask me to drive you to rehab, I'm going to say yes. If you ask me to go with you to an intake appointment, I will say yes. I will do anything to support your recovery, and I will do nothing to support your drinking.
Absolutely. I think that's a great answer. Now, what are some realistic expectations for relapse and setbacks in recovery?
Relapses are common, unfortunately. It's referred to as the unofficial 13th step in the 12-step programs because it's so common. A lot of people relapse several times before they get long-term recovery. It's expected. Unfortunately, it's a tough problem, a tough disease to manage. So what I always tell people is don't expect perfection of yourself. Take it one day at a time for sure. And if you have a relapse, it does not have to become weeks or months of a relapse. It can be a one-time and back on track. Don't feel like all is lost just because you did drink. You messed up and you drank. It doesn't mean you've lost everything you worked toward. You still have all the skills and knowledge that you got before. You still have all the abilities to stay sober that you had before. You just had a slip.
Yeah, Slips it's like a reset almost. You just got to start from the beginning.
Right. It doesn't have to mean that you're back in addiction for, weeks or months or years before you get sober again. So if it happens, tell somebody about it as soon as you can, and figure out the steps to get yourself back on track.
Okay. And so for someone that's listening right now and thinking, wow, this might be me, what's one thing that you want them to hear from today that we've talked about? Really one thing that they should take away strongly?
If you feel like this might be you, then please talk to someone about it. That's always the first step. Find a person you trust and admit the problem. I think I might have a problem. I'm not sure. What do you think?
That's definitely the hardest step, I think, is admitting it.
It is. But once you say it out loud, you take that power out of it. You take some of that shame out of it. You give your loved one a chance to say, I don't judge you negatively for this. I'm really glad you told me about this. Like, I'm here for you. I'll help you. And that's a good feeling to know that the person is not going to say, well, I wouldn't be friends with you if you had an alcohol problem, right? Because most people are not going to do that. They're going to be supportive. So give somebody a chance to be supportive. Say it out loud. Take the power out of it. And start to plan the first steps of what you want to do to address the problem.
Okay. And so what's one small low-pressure step they can take today before calling a doctor or program? My guess is you're going to say admit that they have the problem to someone, but maybe something else that they can do.
Admit that you have the problem. Get online and take one of those self-screeners to kind of confirm for yourself. And then a first step, if you're willing and ready, get the alcohol out of your house. The harder you make it to get the alcohol, the more time you're going to take to think about it before you do it. So it's a lot more quick and automatic to grab a beer out of the fridge than it is to have to drive to the store and buy some and drive back and open it, and that kind of thing. So in that time, you have a chance to think about that decision. If you think you might have a problem, a small step you can do is get rid of your alcohol, tell somebody, and take a self-screener online.
Okay, great. And what do you hope people will do differently during Alcohol Awareness Month after hearing our conversation today?
I hope that people will consider alcohol-free options, making their celebrations and family gatherings alcohol-free, not relying on that to have fun, finding other ways to make things fun, and having those conversations with their families and with their friends, whether you think you have a problem or not, just to have the conversation about, like, was there ever a time where you felt like you were drinking too much? Maybe when you were in college and you were, hitting the frat parties every weekend, what was that like for you? Just to start having conversation.
Absolutely. And so before I let you go here today, is there anything else that you would like to highlight about Alcohol Awareness Month or just about alcohol in general?
Just that, there is high risk. It doesn't mean people can't drink, but we just have to be aware of how much and how it's affecting us and the people we care about, and be willing to do kind of honest examination of ourselves regularly to see if it's becoming a problem.
All right, perfect. Well, Rachael, thank you so much again for sitting down with us and sharing your wealth of knowledge on this topic. I know I greatly appreciate hearing about this, and I'm sure everyone out there as well does, because alcohol runs rampant worldwide. I mean, it's a huge issue for a lot of people, and hearing things sometimes, getting it put in perspective by someone that is an expert in this kind of field, it can really open your eyes and ears to a lot of what you're hearing. And like you said, or like we talked about, this might be me. Sure. So, I'm sure there is someone out there today that when this is out there that they will probably have that thought. So I'm happy we were able to talk about this and, bring a little more awareness to this month. And even though it's just for the month of April, Mid-Ohio Valley, it does not mean that we shouldn't take this seriously every other month of the year just because it's, awareness raised for 1 month. It can happen the other 11 months of the year too. There's a reason there's dry January as well. Other things that go on. So we're not drinking alcohol. We had a great time here today. So you can always still have fun in any kind of setting and not have to have alcohol with you. But Rachael, thank you so much for joining me as always. And can't wait to see what we're talking about next week.
Absolutely.
Well, that'll do it for us here, Mid-Ohio Valley. Thanks for joining us for another Mental Health Monday. And we'll see you again next Monday.